Joining us now is Dr. Kyle Brumfield. He's a research associate at the University of Maryland Institute for Advanced Computer Studies. Kyle, thanks for being here with us. How typical is this from an overall coverage standpoint at this point in the season? And what's behind this most recent uptick in bacteria?
Sure. One thing that we're seeing is that these changes in precipitation patterns are really having a dramatic impact on what actually gets into the waterway. We're seeing that the heavy rainfall actually creates stormwater runoff, it stirs up the nutrients, and eventually it creates high fecal levels in the waterways. But one thing that I want to point out is that when we're talking about fecal indicator bacteria, we're primarily referring to E. coli and Enterococci. Those are the bacteria that are typically found in higher concentrations in the intestines of humans and animals. And they're really best viewed as like an environmental check engine light. So they don't necessarily always tell us exactly what might be wrong with the waterway, but it could be useful as an indicator that something bad might be going on.
When you talk about that heavy rain, as a former Floridian, my mind goes back to the peninsula. I'm thinking back during Irma and in other tropical events. We had heavy rain, and you had some of those nutrients washing out, and it did lead to things like algae blooms and some extra bacteria. We're moving into, or we're officially in a new hurricane season, a likely below average one with a suppressing El Nino. Does that help at all? I mean, as far as a lack, if we had a lesser coverage or amount of tropical systems, at least in spots, moving through the season?
Certainly. And these past couple years, with the exception of this year, we've actually seen an increased number of Atlantic hurricanes. And one thing that's happening in those situations, particularly after Hurricane Ian, for example, is that these heavy storm waters are actually bringing contaminated water into the waterways where people might not necessarily come in contact with them. In addition to that, the heavy currents, they stir up nutrients, they stir up the sediments where bacteria are known to thrive. And then this creates a situation where people might come into closer contact with the water that they might not necessarily otherwise. And one of the things that we can do about this is really, it's all about prevention and awareness. So when we're talking about beach closures, it actually shows that we have the successful systems in place and that there are really good ways to help prevent and educate the public about when the bacterial concentrations might be high. So some of the things that people might do are, for example, wash your hands when you're swimming, shower after you're swimming, and cover open wounds. It's also important to have waterproof bandages. And it's certainly important to consider that the risk is not the same for everybody. Young children and elderly and immunocompromised people might be at higher risk. So these are all important things to consider. So people need to make sure that they check with their local authorities about their current situation so that they can make educated decisions.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point there. If the contaminants are there, ideally we would like to know about it, right? And then assess our own situation and make decisions accordingly. How soon is it known when those contaminants exceed or drop below some of those more critical levels?
Sure. So one of the things that we are doing is we are actually using satellite remote sensing at the University of Maryland and in collaboration with the University of Florida, where we can actually monitor the environmental conditions and we can predict where population movement might be, some of the agricultural activities and storm runoff events. And using all of this, we can actually predict up to a couple weeks in advance about when and where the elevated bacterial levels might occur.
Wow. That's really cool. We're up against it. I'd love to have you back, talk more about this. I know folks maybe don't want to hear about these things, working at the summer. They just want to enjoy their vacation. But very interesting to see how this is being monitored, tracked, and forecasted moving through a busy season like the summer. That's Kyle Brumfield with the University of Maryland. Great to have you on this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.